All right, guys, welcome back. It is a beautiful day, but we do not have a ton of daylight left, so we're gonna make this pretty quick. And the topic I've chosen, I think, is perfect for this because today we're gonna be talking about target transitions. And this is a very simple concept to get down, but it's incredibly hard to master this. We're gonna start by keeping it simple and just doing exercises with 2 targets, then we'll work up to 3 and then 4 targets. I'll talk about the training strategies that I use in my own training to increase the speed of my transitions, and then I'll show it on camera by going through some of these exercises with you. The reason I say that transitions are simple is because they really are. If I were to give you just one sentence to understand effective target transitions, it would be eyes first, gun second. It's not even a complete sentence. That would be something your English teacher gets mad at you for, but it's incredibly helpful for our shooting training. Here's me aimed at target 1, and then here's me aimed at target 2. And if you were looking very closely, you could see my eyes moved to the second target before the gun did, right? So shooting is a very visual activity, for better or worse. The bullets are gonna go where you're looking, just like driving or skateboarding. If you've experienced, looking on the outside of a turn as you're driving on a pretty sharp turn, you're gonna kind of veer off and be like, oh crap, let me correct myself, right? But if you're looking in the correct spot, you're gonna be in a really good place. So you wanna look to where you're headed to. I never wanna be searching for my next target through my sights or through my optic, because at that point I'm seeing the world through a toilet paper tube and I'm killing my awareness. So what I want to do here is, again, I'm aimed at the first target, and then I'm going to disconnect my eyes. I'll even turn my head if the transition is wide enough. And then, now that I've got this next target, and ideally a spot on the next target picked out, I'm now going to let the gun follow and just meet right there. Some instructors will compare this dynamic to moving a mouse on a computer, right? You're not looking at the mouse as you do it, you're looking at the screen and then looking at the next spot on the screen where you want the cursor to go and just dragging it there, right? So very similar with the guns here. When I'm dry firing a simple transition like this, what I'm really looking for is how cleanly and ready to fire like a good, accurate shot I am after the transition, right? So I'll typically start aimed like so. I've got a delay, and then that felt pretty good. That felt decent. That felt great. Now, as you start to really push the speed here, you'll see typically one of 2 things happening. One, you'll be impatient and then you will break the shot the moment you are crossing into the target. We call these drag-ons, right? Because your rounds are kind of dragging onto the target, eventually, if you're shooting multiple shots, getting to where you originally intended to aim. And then the other way we can mess this up is by having a ton of tension in our body and possibly still being visually connected to our sights instead of looking for the spot first. And that'll typically cause us to overdrive and then have to correct ourselves. So both of these approaches are bad. One wastes time because we're having to swing back, or the other is we're just not being accurate or accountable enough because we're being impatient with our sight picture as we're coming on to the next target. So we don't want to do either of these things. So I'm at the 10-yard line here, and what we're going to do is one of the first live fire drills that I really enjoy doing. And I don't know if there's a name for it. You're just gonna shoot one shot in transition, but you're not gonna fire the second shot. The reason I'm doing it this way is to really isolate the transition and get a bunch of awareness about how the gun is settling back onto the target. If I were to shoot a shot, transition, and then shoot another shot, I may be really focused on the marksmanship in that second shot, but now since I'm not firing that shot on the second target, I'm gonna be very aware of exactly how those sights are arriving on the target. And then, of course, we can progress to actually firing those shots on the next target. So it'll look a little something like this. You should be aimed at the first target. That was pretty late. If you're looking closely, you could see I probably let the gun recoil and then I transitioned. We don't want that. So now I'll start on the other one, and I'm just working back and forth doing the same thing. Again, bad, right? We're waiting too long. We want to leave instantly. That's much better. Great hit too. Good. All right, so I'll do a couple more of these. It's great. I'm loving it. So I'm leaving in recoil. And I'm there and I'm ready for the next shot. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. You can see we've got on the first target, it's looking very happy. Very pleased with that. and the second one's a little loose. Again, the marksmanship here isn't coming from after the transition, so these should ideally look a lot like my first target and not a lot like my second target. So we're not really measuring the marksmanship there. That's essentially like a test of your slow fire marksmanship ability, because all you're doing is pressing the trigger after the timer. So to be clear here, the skill we're isolating isn't really coming from the bullets, except for the fact that we are training ourselves to leave the moment we fire that shot, right? Because we've got all the time in the world before this par time goes off to ensure we have a good sight picture. Those hits better be there, right? There's another coach whose stuff I really appreciate. His name is Tom Castro, and he essentially teaches his shooters 2 rules. His first rule is sights, right? The sights are gonna give you permission for every shot you fire. That sounds pretty sensible, right? And then his second rule, which I really like and applies to this, is the trigger, right? So the trigger breaking is going to give you permission to do the next task, whether it's firing another shot on the same target, getting out of a position and moving, reloading your gun, or in this case, transitioning to another target, right? So we need to be transitioning the moment that shot breaks, because we're done there, and any extra time spent on that target, kind of like looking at it to see if your hits were there, no, all of that should have been done beforehand by confirming you had a good sight picture and executing on it properly. Now it's time to go. So with 3 targets here in a wider array, what I'm really looking for is pushing some like close, fast, aggressive shooting. So I'm sure y'all are familiar with a drill called the bill drill, right? This is typically done at 7 yards. So that looks like this. Right? Nothing crazy. So 6 shots on one target, right? But we have 3 targets here. So what if I could get 2 shots on every target and make it sound like a bill drill, right? So we'd be minimizing our transitions to where it sounds like everything's happening on one target. I think that sounds pretty fun to me. Let's see if we can do that. And this brings us to what I call cadence training, right? So now, instead of the stimulus being, okay, I've got a good sight picture, now I'm gonna fire a shot, I'm now pushing my speed to the same speed that I'm maintaining on one single target. And as you can see here, if you're looking closely, we've got a lot to talk about, right? Drag off, right? So it's the opposite of a drag on. I'm being impatient before I leave this target, and my shots are drifting off because I'm already trying to get to the next one. And then you can see here, 2 Charlies, one on the left, one on the right. Which one do you think happened first? Right, so I'm dragging through it. And then here's really rough, because I was so impatient that we sent a miss off the target and then pushed it off to the right with too much tension, right? So this is a textbook, like all the different ways you can screw this up. When you have something like this happen, I would not recommend that you keep doing it, right? Because with this amount of mistakes and mics, you're kind of moving a little bit outside the growth or the learning zone and more into the danger zone. Not that you're being unsafe per se, but that if we're sending a bunch of mics, we don't want that. So if you're trying to train for a cadence, that's cool. Just understand what place, what role that should have in your training. And it's really like transitions like this, and you need to be thoughtful about the execution here, right? So what I'll do is I'll slightly, just slightly, slow down the entire pace of the shooting, but I'll still try to keep it consistent to see kind of where that edge is. So that rep is what we typically hear from people. It's ba-ba, ba-ba, ba-ba. There's a big gap because the transition's taking a bunch of time, and they may even be exacerbating this problem by being the type of shooter who shoots 2 shots on one sight picture, right? So you'll see them, they'll be like a C-class or a D-class shooter, and I'm not hating, it's just everyone's been through this if they're that type of shooter. And they get on target and they rip 2 shots as fast as they can, and then the transition is just super slow. So don't be like this. If you're training for the cadence, try to force yourself to keep it consistent, like this. So that was a 374, and if you look at the splits, you'll see 40, 44, 42, 47, 42. So relatively consistent, not robot consistent, but we're about there. And of course, that was incredibly comfortable. So you've got a couple different ways to play this game, right? If you watched the last video we did about increasing your shooting speed, you can tell I used par times a lot. And for exercises like this, I think this can be incredibly helpful too. I would like to get a 2-second run at that speed before we push to par times those. Now, when you're training and you're shooting like reactively, like the results matter, the one cue that I find to be the most helpful to kind of bring things back in without artificially slowing down is to surrender to my vision, right? So I'm telling myself when I have a rough rep, just wait and confirm a good sight picture, and that's all that needs to happen. I just need to trust everything else that's going on. So let's do that. So let's do this. I'm gonna surrender to my vision and let myself do what I know how to do. So that was 6 alphas and a 206. Now I'm taking up all the A zone. I paid for the whole A zone. I am taking up the whole A zone. So we can either tighten it up and get even more accountable, or we can push the time. I'd like to see if we can maintain the speed and keep it even tighter than that. So let's do that. It was a rough draw. I think the difference between the 213 and the 20 something was because of that. 2 alphas here, 2 alphas here, and then a little bit of extra tension, climbed in and said hello, and I dipped, I believe, the second shot on this target just a little bit low. We're pretty close here, right? So I'm looking for much tighter hits than this, but I think there's value in having a very close wide array when you're trying to work on transitions, because there's a ton of shooters who do very well at that 25 to 35 yard range. And that same shooter, if they're really working on their distance shooting for a long time, their ability to be incredibly aggressive at close distance, if they're not keeping that honed, can kind of fall off. So I really like to work both sides of the spectrum here. 199, 2 alphas, 1 Charlie for the exact same reason. It is just a little bit low here at 6 o'clock. Again, all I have to do is surrender to my vision and everything is going to work out. And that is 6 alphas and a 198. I'm telling you guys, you just give yourself that cue to surrender to your vision and you're seeing it work in real time. And those are some of my tightest hits out of this entire array. So here, I had these 2 that were high up. I had another 2 that were pretty close. And then the other 2 here were also closer. I don't remember exactly which ones they were, but I was watching it in living color and I was like, this is good. So again, when you're working in a very balanced way and you're not shooting to a cadence, you're still trying to shoot the pace of your sights and you're having those mistakes, don't artificially slow down, because then you're kind of selling yourself short of those training gains. I want you to give yourself that cue. Eyes first, gun second, surrender to your vision, and I promise if you do it properly, everything will work out. You just saw it happen. What we're gonna finish with is one of my favorite exercises for both live and dry fire, and this is referred to as designated target. Like many other practical shooting drills, what we're gonna do is exactly what the name of the drill makes you think about. So we're gonna designate one of these targets and then we're gonna transition to all the others. But the twist is, in between each transition, we're going to come back to the designated target. So on this first rep, we're gonna make the far target out there a little bit past 20 yards, the designated target. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and finish on the designated target. So this is a 14 round string. You need to make sure you're not just sending ammo down range by being very intentional about this drill. A couple dry fire reps can help, but I do want to see where my cold performance is at on this. So when you have a big distance change up like this, you also get the value of being able to really test how well you're doing at using levels of confirmation, right? So if my shots sound like bop, bop at 20 yards, they really shouldn't sound like bop, bop at 5 yards right there, right? It needs to sound quite a bit more aggressive, as long as all the other hard skills are there to support my sights getting on target and tracking in that manner. So here we go. Let's see what we've got. Again, the far target will be our designated one. All right, the last shot I called pretty far off to the left. Let's just take a look. Sometimes you'll get way too sucked into your sights as well. That is definitely what happened here at 5 yards. So we went 1, 2, just like how with doubles, that second shot can track high. I felt the firing hand tension here and we suffered the consequences. 1, 2. 2 decent alphas here at 15 yards. And then, okay, so the shot that I called off to the left wasn't as bad as we thought. It's right there in the C zone. So we have 2, 4, 6, 8. Everything's there, but it could be cleaner. On a big exercise like this, I find it especially valuable to leverage dry fire. Even if you're at the range, it can be very helpful. So we did that in a 706 with a couple Charlies, no deltas or mics, so that's pretty good. And we can leverage par times in the same way we have in other videos to kind of clean this up. Let's see if we can shave an entire second off of this. Let's go to 6 seconds. So that's 6 seconds. I felt a little sloppy on some of those shots at 20, so let's do that one more time. And that was just a little bit slower. One more. I know I have this. That was ample time left over. All right, we have time for one more. We're losing daylight and people are showing up for real class. That was a 649. So we kept half the gains that we got in dry fire. And you saw how I attacked that target at 5 yards. And the only Charlie on the target is still this guy. And we have 2, 4, 6, 8, even number, no mics. 2 alphas here at 10. Still only have that one Charlie. Now I don't know which rep this came from, but we do have a delta and a couple far Charlies, 2 deltas actually. So we need to look at that. And then you can see here at 20 yards, I'm favoring the right side a little bit, so I'll look at that. But we have alphas, mainly close Charlies. This needs a little bit more patience, but I'm overall happy with the gains we've made here in about 6 minutes on this. Again, transitions are simple. They're just very difficult to put the work in and program those hard skills into yourself. Leverage these tools like par times and shooting to a cadence, but understand what they're for. Don't get lost in the sauce. Don't just go through the reps without thinking about what you're actually doing, and you will be set up for success here. That's all I've got for you guys. If you have any other training strategies that have helped you clean up your target transitions, let people know in the comments. You can get hats from bettermarksman.co.com. If you want to host a class, reach out there using the contact form as well. And as always, thank you for watching, and I hope this video made you a better marksman.